Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. This week is kind of a reverse of last week, as there is actually a ton of news to cover, but not any one big main topic that I had in my mind that I wanted to cover on the main segment of this podcast. So we're going to start with the news, and then we will transition to getting my guests' thoughts on a couple of recent Switch 2 releases. Joining me first to break down the news and talk about Mio Memories in Orbit, it's Game Informer's editor-in-chief, Matt Miller. Matt, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you're always super busy, so it's always a joy to have you on. I know that, I have a rotating cast of Game Informer guests, a rotating cast of guests from outside of Game Informer, which I love to, sub them in as well. But it's rare that we have the head honcho over at Game Informer on. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to chat all things Nintendo.
Absolutely.
Some housekeeping before we jump in. First of all, thank you so much to everyone for your comments that you left on last week's show, both on Spotify and YouTube, and also for those who shared their most played Switch games from 2025. Matt, I talked to you before the show, and I was like, hey, run this year in review thing on your Nintendo profile and let me know what your most played games on Switch 2 were. You were hesitant to do that and report that as like an accurate depiction of your gaming habits. Why?
I mean, I could. It's not that I'm hesitant to so much as it would create a very weird picture because I tend not to be too fussy about this is my profile and, other people in my family should be using this other thing. And I've got two young kids at home. And as you might imagine, Switch is a sort of the go-to way for them to play games, many of which I'm playing with them. But you'd get a weird mix of things, I think, if I tried to output data about what I've been playing, because it'd be some things that I had in for review or coverage for Game Informer and that kind of thing. Some stuff that I was playing for fun. And then a weird mix of kids games and things that I was, good games from a long time ago that I'm returning to and now playing with my kids. So anyway, yeah, I sort of suggested to you that it might not paint a particularly clear picture of a person playing video games.
What do you think your kid's most played game was?
We maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but my older child, my daughter and I, we made our way through Tears of the Kingdom over the course of, it took most of 2025 really, because, I'm not sitting down and playing with her for 8 hours at a stretch. But that was the big one. We did both over the course of her early adoption into the gaming hobby. We've played through both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So wow. I bet Tears would be up there for her. But there's some other big ones that she likes. She liked Mario Kart a lot when Switch 2 came out in the middle of the year. So she's played a good bit of that, kind of more on her own. She likes just free roaming in Mario Kart.
Oh,
she doesn't really want to race anybody. She just kind of wants to explore.
Sounds like me when I first got my real world driver's license. I was like, I don't really want to go anywhere, but I like driving, so I'm just going to drive around the neighborhood and go to the 7-Eleven and ask my parents if they need me to pick anything up, just because I liked doing it.
For sure.
What about your most played Switch game? What do you think that would have been?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There's certainly things that were on Switch that I don't. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember if I played on Switch or on PlayStation or PC, that kind of thing. Hades 2 would be up there probably. I put a lot of time into Metroid Prime 4, just in the tail end of 2025. So I bet that one would kind of be up there.
What we're still kind of still recent in that, so I don't want to get too spoilery, but what were your overall thoughts on that?
I think I had a little bit of mixed feelings about Metroid Prime 4, more so than I was perhaps expecting to. I did play it all the way to completion, and I did a bunch of I mean, I almost 100%ed it. I didn't do all the scans, you
Yeah,
know.
that's hard.
It's hard. It's also like it's not especially interesting to me. And given that the difference between like what I did and getting all those like hard to remember to do scans was like a slightly different cinematic, like at the very end of the game, it wasn't really something I was dying to make happen. Uh, but I thought it had some moments of brilliance. Like oh gosh, this really brings me back to great Metroid Prime stuff. But it was a little bit too handholdy for me at moments.
Mm.
And the desert thing, even though I kind of liked the motorcycle, the constant desert exploration, like just driving across the desert thing, didn't really do it for me. And I don't know, it didn't totally land for me, if I'm being honest. But I thought it was a good game. I wouldn't warn people away from it or anything like that. But I kind of went into it expecting like, gosh, this is definitely going to be, given my love of Metroid and these kinds of exploration games and things like that, I bet this will be one of my games of the year. And it didn't emerge as that for me.
Yeah, I like Metroid Prime 4 quite a bit, but I agree with a lot of your criticisms and hesitances with the game. I assume you liked Hades 2 quite a bit more?
Yeah. Hades 2 was great. I put as much time into Hades 2 at launch as I did when it hit early access. I think I kind of had two big beats with that game. And they had launched with such a strong early access build. I think right at that point, I played almost everything that I could play of the game. And then dropped back in a few times over the cycle of them adding in new bosses and locations and things like that, and then came back for more at the tail end. We talked about this a little bit in our conversations about the end of year stuff. I mean, Hades 2 certainly did well by us. We liked it a lot. We gave it a lot of love in our end of year awards and things like that. I wonder a little bit sometimes about how much that game maybe took a hit just in the overall, like how much it was in the conversation about 2025 because it had been so prominently successful throughout its early access launch. Whereas like Clair Obscur was a game that like it arrived in 2025, it made this giant splash, and it became this thing that like everybody was talking about from that point on through the rest of the year. I think both of those games are game of the year worthy titles. But I think Claire was a little bit more on top of mind for a lot of people.
It was a huge surprise as well. Like I think everybody expected Hades 2 1.0 to be incredible because Hades 2 early access was incredible.
Yes.
So it was like, okay, this met expectations.
It is just as incredibly great as I thought it was going to be. And no shade implied there towards that game. It's just, I think, a slightly different model for how they were rolling out content. They've made, as well as anybody, I think that team has capitalized on how to approach an early access title in a smart way. And to bring value to the player at all stages of engagement with it. But yeah, it's an interesting thought exercise, I think, maybe about like if your pure goal is accolades at the end of the year and making a big splash in a particular time period, I think early access can potentially hurt a little bit. It maybe takes away a little bit of the excitement and the how much it's in the conversation with other gamers talking to other gamers and things like that in the moment that it launches for real.
Though it worked out just fine for Baldur's Gate 3.
That's true.
I think it also struggles by being a sequel to a game that came out relatively recently. So people are like, oh yeah, hey, I loved Hades 1. I love Hades 2 a lot as well. It's just, I would say similarly to like, Tears of the Kingdom following up Breath of the Wild. It's like, oh yeah, this is kind of more of the same with new mechanics, and I love it a lot. But it's like not the big surprise that something like Baldur's Gate 3 or Clair Obscur Expedition 33 ended up being.
I wonder with Baldur's Gate 3, I have not looked at the numbers to know, but I do wonder, I remember that making a bigger splash at 1.0 launch. And it makes me wonder how, like I think they had some pretty engaged players in the early access period, but I wonder how like precisely how many.
Yeah.
And if there's a difference there between the model that Hades 2 had, where I think there were a lot of people who jumped into that game during the early access period and were had put maybe even the bulk of their time that they were going to put into it in before 1.0 hit. I don't know that was probably the case with Baldur's Gate 3, but I bet I could be proven wrong if somebody looked closely at the numbers of how that played out.
Yeah, and I think that maybe the Hades 2 thing would have made a bigger splash if it wasn't just on PC, which it was technically already on, and then Switch 2, which, that's an all-new platform for that game when it hit 1.0, but it's not on Xbox or PlayStation, which, that's a pretty big pool of players.
We're also talking about Hades 2 as if it somehow got some weird, like, it was shuffled off the board here, which is not the case, right? Like Hades 2 did very well, I think, and
it was the only 10 out of 10 last year at Game Informer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought it was great. So I bet that team's doing just fine with how strongly their game performed both critically and commercially, and I hope it continues to find an audience. Hades was striking to me for the type of game that it was. I would argue even to today, the original Hades continues to have a pretty enthusiastic audience. It's the kind of game you can go back to a lot and find new things to enjoy and try different builds and all that kind of stuff.
So, Matt, speaking of Game Informer's end of year awards and teams that are doing just fine, we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary since we reunited under the Game Informer banner after we were shut down in August of 2024.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, but how are you feeling about the first year and kind of the look ahead to our second year operating in our current form?
Yeah, it's really, I'm thrilled, I guess is the big takeaway. Most people, I think, probably think about it being a little bit later in the year. But for us, who joined back up as a team and started working, it was pretty close to now. It was like the tail end of January and early in February, where we were really starting to get back into working together. And then it took a little time for us to prep messaging about like, hey, we're back. And then a little bit more time after that before we relaunched the magazine and subscriptions and things like that. And so the early months were a lot of prep. One of the things I will always fondly remember about that period is that after we knew we were back, we made a kind of a fun call, and what I thought was a good call, to take a look at a lot of the games that we had missed. We call them gap games, I think, or something like that.
Gap
blip
reviews.
Games, to use Marvel parlance, and it was neat. I think all of us had continued to stay engaged with games during the time that GI wasn't active, but it was neat to like go back and try to bring that professional critical eye to a bunch of titles. And we kind of got those up in those early days after we were back re-announced and out there. I think by and large, it's been really cool though, this last year. I'm really pleased about the nature of the magazine and how we've been able to position it as a little bit more of a premium product for hobbyists, and people who are really engaged with games. Makes me really, really happy that we set up the St. Jude partnership. That means a lot to me, and I know it does to a lot of the people on the team, that there's a chunk of every subscription goes towards that really worthy cause. That makes me really happy. I'm happy that we're kind of continuing that. And I've also been especially grateful that so many of our industry partners were so eager to hop back in and continue to do work together. I think I believed that would be the case. before we started doing it. I knew we had good friends and relationships with developers and publishers and partnerships there, to cover games and things like that. But until we were actually in the mix and making phone calls and saying like, hey, it's not public yet, but we're coming back. I mean, you remember how that was. It was like people were stoked. It really made me feel happy that that we were doing what we were doing and that it meant that much to so many different people.
It really started to feel as we were having those calls. It was almost like in that, if you've watched X-Men First Class, when Charles and Magneto are going around and recruiting the mutants, and they're like, "Oh, cool, yeah, that's awesome, I'm in." And that's kind of how it felt. I don't know if I was Professor X or Magneto, but
well, we were. It was definitely a cool experience in that regard, and I think it's been an interesting experience just from a business perspective to be. It's like a legacy organization that's been around for 30 plus years. And I think that there's a lot of people who have kind of foundational memories in gaming about their enjoying, finding games through Game Informer or getting the magazine when they were kids or teenagers or whatever. So it has that quality, but simultaneously we're also like a startup. Mm-hmm. And there's an unusual dynamic there. Like we're having to build an audience sort of from scratch and find our way as an independent entity, even while we have that sort of legacy connection to the past. And I think we're finding a good balance there. I'm really pleased that we're able to bring the print magazine back, but also continue to grow what we're trying to do on the website and with video and podcast stuff and social channels and that kind of thing. And I suspect without revealing things that we're not ready to talk about. I mean, I think 2026, we got some pretty cool things we're trying to make happen on that score. We have a lot of very cool possibilities for big coverage that we're going to do for things like cover stories and things like that. So that always is sort of an organic thing that happens gradually, but we are in a lot of conversations with different folks and there's some pretty cool titles on the way. I think some listeners could probably guess at what some of those things might be. So I'm very enthusiastic about the future and what we could be doing together and how we can continue to grow. And I hope it resonates with people. Mm-hmm. I hope we try to bring an eye to games that is critical and thoughtful, but also entertaining and positive. It's not built out of snark and or being angry at everything about the hobby. It's sort of we like games. We enjoy playing games. We like playing them together. We like having a good time with the stuff with our hobby, and we want to translate that over into the coverage we do.
Absolutely. And that coverage includes our recently revealed next cover story, which actually is a game that's coming to Switch 2, and that is 007 First Light. And would you know it? I wrote that cover story. It's not available.
You did, Brian? Really?
Yes, I did. So I did travel to Copenhagen, Denmark, before all the nonsense and international geopolitics that are happening right now were going down. So it was nice to be over there as an American before it was kind of weird to be over there as an American. Sure. But it's a game that I'm excited to talk about, and I'm going to do that next week after the cover story goes live on GameInformer.com. So look forward to that if you were listening to this episode and excited about the first James Bond game since 2012. That's crazy to think about.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to get that issue in print form, you can head to GameInformer.com/subscribe, and if you do that in the next couple of weeks, you'll get that as your first issue, or you can wait until probably mid-February and then look for it at your local bookstore. Right now, you can probably find the World of Warcraft Midnight issue on bookstores right now, at bookstores right now, and that also has our end of year stuff in it. Or no, yeah, it's our end of year stuff. Sorry, the wires crossed. Because the 007 issue has our most anticipated stuff. Yeah. So stuff to look forward to all around if you are a fan of Game Informer. And, lots of cool stuff to read in all of those issues. But as for this podcast, just a reminder that this show is brought to you by the fine folks who support me on Patreon. Without them, this show literally would not exist. You can get access to the community Discord for as little as $3 a month, where we are talking Nintendo, the latest gaming news, and showing off all of our new games and collectibles on a pretty regular basis. There are also $5 and $10 tiers to get you things like early and ad-free episodes, plus shout-outs at the end of every show. You can join the team that makes this show happen by going to patreon.com and searching for Brian Shea or All Things Nintendo. It is only because of the fine folks who support this podcast on Patreon that I'm able to keep doing this as an independent entity week after week. And also just a reminder that 100% of the money that comes to me from Patreon in this month will be donated to the ACLU, who are constantly on the front lines of civil rights battles. If you would like to support them more directly, you can head to aclu.org and donate straight to them, or you can visit the link in the show description. Also, one more thing that I wanted to bring up before we really jump into the news. I'm looking to do another All Things Nintendo community night for Patreon and Discord folks. The last one was on Mario Kart World. We used Game Chat. We had an absolute blast, even though we kind of discovered some of the limitations of Game Chat during that community night. I don't have a date that we would shoot for quite yet, but we're starting to narrow down what games we could play during it. It obviously needs to be kind of a larger multiplayer game. So I was looking at stuff like Kirby Air Riders, Smash Ultimate, maybe Fall Guys, or we could even just do Mario Kart World again if that's easiest for everyone. But everything is up in the air. So if you are on Patreon, if you're on Discord, if you're even just listening to this on Spotify and think you might want to join in, leave a comment of what game you think would work best, and then I will try to communicate with the people who support the show on Patreon about what days would work. All right, with all of that out of the way, Matt, let's jump into some of the news. We have started, notably, we've started a couple of the last few, I guess the last couple episodes straight through on a bit of a downer note. And while this isn't as big of a downer note as the last couple, because the last couple were like, deaths around the industry and then the stuff happening in Minnesota, this is going to definitely take its toll on the industry, and it's going to disappoint quite a few people. And that is news out of Ubisoft. So I have been saying for, I would say at least a couple of years now, that I'm really worried about what was once one of the publishers that was like a powerhouse alongside places like EA and Activision. And it seems as though the dam has kind of finally started to break a little bit here. And that comes through the news that Ubisoft has announced a major reorganization of the company, which includes 6 games being canceled, 7 games being delayed, and 2 studios closing, and the restructuring of its various development units. So we already knew that Ubisoft Halifax, which did a lot of mobile game development, and then Ubisoft Stockholm, which I think was like a more of a support studio, they were getting shut down. We already kind of knew that coming into this announcement. And then we also already knew about layoffs at Ubisoft Abu Dhabi, Red Lynx, and Massive Entertainment. Massive Entertainment being the Division studio, as well as Avatar Frontiers of Pandora and Star Wars Outlaws. And then Red Lynx, I think, is most notable for its work on the Trials series, the motorbike kind of like side-scrolling series. Going forward, Ubisoft is establishing 5 creative houses to oversee different parts of the business. One is focused on making Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six more regular and profitable. And this creative house is known as CH1 or Vantage Studios, which is part of Ubisoft that is part owned by Tencent that we learned about last year. And then the next one focuses on shooter experiences like The Division, Ghost Recon, and Splinter Cell. Another is for live service games like For Honor, The Crew, Riders Republic, Brawlhalla, and Skull and Bones. The fourth is a creative house for more narrative-driven and fantasy brands like Anno, Might and Magic, Rayman, Prince of Persia, and Beyond Good and Evil. I don't know how Rayman fits into narrative, but I guess they fit into the fantasy side. And then the final creative house is for more casual facing experiences. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, we also learned of those cancellations and delays. The 6 games that Ubisoft has canceled include the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, which was originally announced in 2020 for a 2021 release, but it's just been one delay after another since that happened. It was officially canceled this week, along with additional titles that include 3 new IPs and a mobile title. This is obviously super disappointing for a lot of folks, but our coworker Kyle Hilliard actually made a little bit of I guess a pointed joke that Ubisoft seems to be the only company in the games industry that can't figure out how to remake its games, because we have so many remakes these days, and like Ubisoft just seems to continue to struggle because that carries into the delays, as Ubisoft has delayed 7 games. And the big one that is being reported is a remake of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And the reason for all of this was Ubisoft saying they were doing a thorough portfolio review, and they looked at the quality and like compared to like where they were wanting it to be. And all of these games fell short of the bar, which is, it's probably not great news that, 13 games fell short of the quality. But Matt, you've written a book about Assassin's Creed. I know you've worked with Ubisoft on quite a few projects over the years at Game Informer. How did this news hit you when you read about it on Wednesday?
I mean, I was first and foremost really bummed because of the livelihoods, the jobs that I think were affected here. I mean, it's a lot of people who work hard in games. No matter what your thoughts are on the quality of Ubisoft's games or the nature of what they're doing, like it's a lot of people like at those studios who are creative, thoughtful, smart people who presumably are out of work or maybe having to reshuffle and move to new locations and that kind of thing. And I feel really bad about that. I think in terms of end user gamer experience and what it means for us, it's also a big bummer. Um, uh, when things are in the language of business, when things are talked about measures of quality and things like that, and whether they would hit the bar, there's an unspoken part of that, which is like, it is not necessarily quality. It is often, will this make enough money? Um, and if there's not a thought that it's not going to make enough money, then it hasn't hit the measure. It hasn't hit the measure of quality, right? And so I would hazard to guess that there are a lot of these titles that are sort of being talked about as if they weren't as good as they could be, that were actually great, including probably some of these unmentioned and unannounced new IP, because I think new IP is very, very hard to get across the finish line at a big publisher these days. Some of those could have been brilliant, really exciting new directions and risky ideas. Maybe not. I mean, who knows? But it would have been cool to see what they could be. And it's very possible that some of those things were lost to history now because they didn't fall into a neat bucket of what these these 5 distinct entities, these houses, are going to be and what they're going to do, or because it was an unusual idea that was untested, and so it was uncertain as to whether it was going to make a lot of money or not. So I don't know. I think that's a real bummer. I'm personally really unhappy about the Sands of Time news. I've been looking forward to that for a long time. That was an early favorite of mine in sort of 3D platforming and traversal and things like that. I think it's an important game. In a lot of ways, it paved the way for things like Assassin's Creed from Ubisoft and more free-form exploration in games all across the industry. It would have been neat to see it come to fruition. So I don't know. I tend to like to try to find the positive where I can, but I think this is just bad news, unfortunately, and part of a larger trend we've seen where big publishers are being forced through the economic realities of making games and things like that to make some hard calls. And in other cases, and it's hard to know when it is this, it's not because of the inability to do it, but just a desire to we really just want to be making more money, and we think, we could make money with this, but not as much money as we want. And I'm not saying that I know for a fact that's what is going on in this particular situation, but Ubisoft, as you pointed out, has had for a number of years been in a tough spot. But I guess I would say I'm happy that they're still around, regardless of people's opinions about some recent Ubisoft games. I think they do have the capability to put out really neat products, really cool projects, and there's a lot of series I still look forward to seeing what they're going to do with, and I think that'll continue to be the case.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll learn more about what some of the other delays were as these years go by. We might even learn about some of the canceled things, because we see how like leaks happen all the time, especially when it comes to canceled projects. Like there are entire YouTube channels that are dedicated to canceled projects, which are always super fascinating to watch and go down those rabbit holes. But if the report of an Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag remake is true, then I wonder if the announced Splinter Cell remake is also caught up in this. And then my mind keeps going of like, all right, is Beyond Good and Evil 2 also delayed again? Because didn't that game get announced in like 2016 or something?
It was a long time ago, long enough that I couldn't tell you. I think it's a game I would love to learn more about, but who knows?
Let's see when this game was announced. E3 2017.
Yeah.
So we've went the entire Switch generation without any news. So they gave us that reveal trailer 3 months after the Switch 1 launched. Yeah. Haven't really heard a peep since.
Yep.
All right. Well, it's either way, just a pretty big bummer they couldn't figure out how to remake one of, I would say, the most important 3D action games of all time. And then, obviously an even bigger bummer about the closures and any impending additional layoffs, which, I saw Stephen Totillo, formerly of Kotaku, now of GameFile. His initial reporting seems to indicate the layoffs will be in the hundreds. So that's really sad as well. So
yeah, it sucks.
I mean, we've both been in that spot where it's, both surviving layoffs and then also being the subject of layoffs and closures. And it's harrowing no matter what side of that fence you end up on. It's either completely destroys your morale or completely destroys your livelihood. And neither of those is particularly great, especially in a creative field like this.
Yeah.
Not really any great way to segue out of that, but we have a seemingly random but consequential piece of news from Nintendo. Kensuke Tanabe has been with Nintendo since 1986, which makes this year number 40 for him at the company. And he has announced via an interview with Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond was his final game with Nintendo. He is retiring from the company. So his first credited work at Nintendo came in 1987 as the director of course design for a game called Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which, as people know, was also, reskinned and reworked to be known in the West as Super Mario Bros. 2, which he was also the director of course design for. He also worked on course design for Super Mario Bros. 3 and wrote the scenario for Zelda: A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, worked on several other classics, and then in 2005, he became primarily a producer for Nintendo. And since that time, he produced games like Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Donkey Kong Country Returns, Luigi's Mansion 3, Metroid Prime Trilogy, and then, of course, Metroid Prime 4. And I also found that he served as the creative director of Super Nintendo World, the theme parks at Universal Studios,
that's cool.
That's not a completely insubstantial role, because I know that Miyamoto was kind of the guy who was up front and like the figurehead, but that's a big role to really steer Nintendo's in-person events and in-person experiential product into the future, because that seems like it's going to be a big pillar for Nintendo going forward.
I think so.
But yeah, Miyamoto is always kind of the guy they put forward for that. So I feel like Tanabe hasn't really been front and center for interviews lately, but I know at one point he was. I found lots of interviews from him in the late 2020 teens, and then the 2020 and 2021. It seemed like he was doing some interviews. Have you ever interacted with him?
No, but I would back up your assertion that he's been an important talent over there. I think there's good reason to think that a lot of those games that you mentioned, their names in part because of like his work. More power to him heading off and hopefully enjoying a nice retirement. But sad that we won't have his contributions coming in anymore.
Yeah, it's also one of those kind of stark reminders that a lot of these Nintendo luminaries are really starting to get up there in age, and
Yeah.
we will likely start seeing a lot of them step away. Like Shigeru Miyamoto, he's not really directly involved with games as much as he's just like overseeing games, overseeing like the movies, overseeing the theme park stuff. So, and like a lot of the merchandising. And then like, you look at people like Takashi Tezuka, Koji Kondo, a lot of that generation that brought us those early NES and SNES games, I think are going to start considering like, looking over the other side of the fence, like, oh, retirement's looking pretty nice right about now. I'm in my 60s or getting up into the 70s. And it's like, yeah, I'd like to enjoy like the last couple of decades of life without having to be stressed about hitting this milestone on this date or whatever. So, I mean, we of course wish Tanabe well in retirement or, whatever he ends up doing. He's only 62 years old, so he has a lot of living left, hopefully, and, a lot of time that he can just enjoy life and not have to worry about work.
Absolutely.
But on top of that, we also got some actual Nintendo game news. So Super Mario Brothers Wonder was one of my favorite games of 2023. And last year when we did that Nintendo Direct, I believe it was in September, they announced that we were getting a Nintendo Switch 2 edition along with a content pack called Meetup in Bella Bell Park that was going to add a lot of new content, most of which we didn't know about until this week. So in Bella Bell Park, which is this new area, there is Attraction Central, which has 2 plazas. There's the local multiplayer plaza that lets up to 4 players on the same system play 17 minigames in co-op or versus. And then you can also use this area with Game Share, and that allows you to, like, if you have a copy of the game, then up to 3 other players who have their Switch 2s with them can play with you as long as they're like in the same room or in the vicinity of your Switch. So that's cool. And then there's Game Room Plaza, which is for local wireless or online play for up to 8 players in local wireless or up to 12 players in online. And I mean, maybe this is a future community night that I mentioned before. But this seems like it's not nearly as fully featured because it sounds like there are only 6 mini games as part of this section of the expansion. Then there's a part that is called Camp Central, and the first part they talked about here is called the Toad Brigade Training Camp. And this gives you a list of missions to complete in pre-existing single-player courses in the main game of Mario Wonder. And there were examples like collecting a set number of coins in time, defeating enemies within the time limit, clearing the courses while maintaining your invincibility, kind of things like that. And up to 4 local players can play this mode together. And then as you complete more, you unlock more missions, you level up your rank with the Toad Brigade. It seems like it's a fun gameplay loop. And then there's also is adding the Koopalings to the game. And it seems like the story is they steal the treasure of Bella Bell Park and you need to hunt them down across the main game. And like, it looks like you're like chasing, like, they said eyewitness reports, and it looked like you like talked to an NPC and they're like, oh, I saw them run in that direction. And you go and follow that. And you're kind of like following this series of leads on the way to finding them. And it looks like when you find them, they have access to the Wonder transformations. So there was one where, you're running through the course and the Koopaling is just like turned into a giant fish and is like swimming at you throughout the stage. You just have to dodge them as you make your way through the level. Or I'm assuming there are also like some boss battles that are included as part of that. So on top of that, this the Meetup in Bella Bell Park expansion also adds Rosalina as a playable character, which is very fitting since she's going to play a huge role in the Mario movie that comes out not long after the release of this expansion. And then there's also another new character in Co-Star Luma, which is a co-op only character. So basically, if you have 2 or more players, one person can choose not co-op Luma, Co-Star Luma. And Co-Star Luma can freely kind of fly around the stage and defeat enemies and collect coins, but they don't take any damage. You can also play as co-star Luma with mouse controls, since it kind of looks like a floating mouse cursor. So that's kind of cool. It seems like this is just like a great way to let kids or people who aren't normally good at platformers like enjoy the action, kind of similar to how it worked in Mario Galaxy, right? Like where
Mm-hmm.
a kid can just point the Wii remote and be like, oh yeah, shoot a star bit at that enemy. And that seems like a great way for kids to join in the action. And speaking of which, they're also adding a new assist mode, which gives any character invincibility from both damage and pitfalls. So, if you get hit, all you do really is you blink and the enemy gets pushed back a little bit. And then if you fall in the pit, they grab like kind of a propeller flower and it floats them up out of it. So it's great for people who just have never played a platforming game, it sounds like. And then they ended the presentation. They didn't give any details on this whatsoever, but they showed off a new power-up as well, the Super Flower Pot power-up that I found some information on the eShop page. It turns Mario into what looks like a rose, and then he can shoot flowers out, and it looks like they go upwards like a platform almost. So I don't know. I guess there's some utility there. And then, of course, if you're on Switch 2, you also get 4K resolution when docked, smoother frame rates, and faster load times. And then it ended with us learning that Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition and Meetup in Bella Bell Park, whew, what a name, comes out March 26th, so just before the Super Mario Galaxy movie, so I would not be surprised if this does pretty well. And if you already own Mario Wonder on Switch 1, the upgrade is $20. So Matt, where does Mario Wonder rank among your favorite Mario games?
I love Mario Wonder. I'm with you. It was one of my favorite games that year. Thought it was whimsical and clever. In everything from the new animations to the music, it felt like a real step forward for the production values of what we expect from a Mario game. I thought the whole Wonder Seed mechanic was really clever and added something exciting. So I'm excited that they're continuing to put focus on the game top level. I think that's cool. I like the idea of an assist mode. Certainly makes it maybe not, it's not targeted for somebody like you or I who's been playing Mario games for 30 plus years. It's like we want to play with our kids, right? And I played with my kid before there was an assist mode, and she did fine. But I bet with my younger child, that kind of thing, or having the star that I can fly around, that he can fly around, that'll be great. Mm-hmm. I think some of the for the things that I like about Mario Wonder, if I'm honest, this strong focus on multiplayer mini games doesn't do much for me. I think if I had my druthers, which I don't, they get to make whatever they want. It's their game. But if I did, I would have said, make me more levels. I love Mario Wonder. I love the Wonder Seed mechanic. Just give me another world to explore, right? Maybe have the core loop of that new world be about this Koopaling thing. And I think probably I would have been more likely to want to spend money or come back into that game if it was just like, hey, this is Mario Wonder, but now there's a bunch more of it, of what you like about that game. Which isn't to say I'm being dismissive of I bet there's some of those mini games might be fun and that kind of thing, but I don't know. I tend to think there's a lot of games out there that offer, if what I'm in the mood for is to play kind of frantic multiplayer mini games, I am not short on options these days. There's a lot of places I can go find that, and people who are doing it really, really well.
Especially on Switch.
Especially on Switch. Even with other Mario games, right? I'm not a big Mario Party fan, but it's not kind of what Mario Party provides to you, right? So I don't know. That doesn't really get me super excited, I guess. But I do. But in a more general sense, I'm very happy to see that game getting some love. It'll be nice to see it in higher quality visuals on Switch 2. And I'm sure that it'll give me reason to bring my family back in to play some more, which will be nice too.
Yeah, I immediately thought of you because you had talked about all the games you've been playing with your kids, and
Yeah.
I saw like the Luma, and then I also saw the assist mode or the whatever it's called, and I was like, oh, this would be great for somebody like Matt, who like his kids are still kind of getting their feet under them when it comes
Hmm.
to platforming and action games and stuff like that. So great for that. And I'm excited for the Koopaling stuff. You're right. Like I'm less thrilled about the multiplayer stuff. I would much rather just have like an entire like couple of new worlds added, which is what I
Mm.
wanted for Mario Odyssey that we never really got.
Yeah.
And that's why I was so excited for Tears of the Kingdom, because I just wanted more of what Breath of the
Yeah.
Wild delivered. And I was like, okay, this looks like that, but with like, a lot more stuff to explore and then also new mechanics. Like that's for a game that I love so much. Like that is kind of what I want. I don't necessarily need like side modes and anything, but like it seems like there's enough new content here to kind of justify that $20 price point. I don't know if there's anything else that they're adding, but yeah, I don't know. I'll definitely check it out.
I think Tears. You make an interesting comparison point. Tears of the Kingdom, I think, is a good example of an amazing game that capitalized on existing systems and fiction and worlds and things like that. And I know it gets a little bit of uh, critique from folks who are like, well, it's just the same Hyrule again. But like, I love Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's such a great game. And it's obviously it's like rooted in the systems and the graphics and things like that were established with Breath of the Wild. I'm happy to go on record of saying that like I would be perfectly fine with seeing m- more Nintendo games do that. They're so good at coming up with clever gimmicks and ideas to root their games in that make them fun. And certainly, it's nice to have new ones, right? When Mario moves from 3D World, or now I'm in Odyssey and I'm throwing my hat, and now I'm in Wonder and I've got the Wonder Seeds, and like each one of those is different. But I mean, a Super Mario Brothers Wonder 2 would be amazing, and I don't think it needs to. I mean, maybe there's a couple new power ups or whatever, but um, new horses, a new silly plot with Bowser, and let me at it. Um, I I think they should do more of it, and just capitalize on the smart ideas that they have, um, and see where it takes them.
Well, when I had those extended conversations with Takashi Tezuka and Shiro Mori about, the creation of Mario Wonder for the Game Informer cover story, they told me that they had like over 1,000 Wonder effect
I remember.
ideas, and I think they
Yeah.
cut it down to like 100 or something
Right.
to like fit into the game. And it's just like, oh man, like that there's a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor, and of course, not all of that is going to be great stuff. That's why it was cut,
Yeah.
but it's still like I wonder if there was like I wonder I wonder if there was enough of like cool ideas that they could iterate on to put out like maybe 20 more as like a thing. But I don't know, it's all speculation. It's as I always tell when like Kyle and I get to speculating on this podcast, it's like, well, why don't they just do this? Game development is so easy. And it's like, no, it's an extremely difficult thing. I know it's very easy for fans to be like, they should just add this feature that would make this game great. It's like, well, there's a bajillion reasons that would be difficult to do.
I
um
I agreed. That said, I do think my point stands in the face of that challenge, right? Which is the idea that I think Nintendo, with their projects, is often eager to jump to a wholly new paradigm
mhm.
for the next, like Mario game or whatever. Um, and I think it's can sometimes be okay to take one that's really good and capitalize on the work that you put in. And I you're right. Game development's very very hard, but like they got to something kind of magical with Super Mario Brothers Wonder. So they could stay there and play with that idea for a while. And it's not unheard of from them, by the way, either. It's not just Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, I think um, Mario Galaxy did that
New
to
Super
great
Mario
success.
Brothers.
Yep. And so it is possible that could happen. And I guess I'm saying that I'd like to see them do that.
Yeah. Well, that's not the only Switch 2 enhancement that we learned about actually this week. So, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD came out about a year ago now, and it was not the most loved port slash remaster when it came out. But Nintendo seems like they are finally going to correct the reasons that people don't like this HD remaster. So it's a free update, and that's what it's called, the free update, and it's actually surprisingly robust. So Dixie Kong, who is a playable character in Tropical Freeze, the sequel, joins the roster of playable characters. She can spin her ponytail to get like extra boost when you jump. She can also slam her ponytail on the ground as an attack. There's also a new mode called Turbo Attack, where you speed through the level faster than you normally could. And the goal is to reach the end of the level before the very, very tight time limit expires. So that's a fun little twist on like how to get through these levels. On top of that, Switch 2 players get an additional free upgrade, which adds game share capabilities, better resolution, higher graphical fidelity, which was one of the main complaints. It looked extremely blurry on Switch 1, and improved load times. Matt, I don't know how much you really heard from the Nintendo community about this, but this remaster already felt like too little too late when it came out because it was like right at the tail end of the Switch 1.
Mm.
We already got Tropical Freeze many, many years ago. So it was like, all right, we were just like sitting on this until there was like a dead zone for Nintendo. But then when it came out, it wasn't even like the level of remaster the players were hoping for. Plus, on top of that, they charged full retail price for it, which further soured the community on the game.
Yeah.
With this update, I'm seeing a lot of people being like, oh, like it's actually the game it should have been a year ago. Like, I don't know if you ever checked out this remaster when it came
Yeah.
out last year, but how do you feel about this?
I think it's cool. I like the additional playable character in particular is fun. When I played it, I dropped off quickly. I mean, I guess that's maybe my clearest comment that I can give about it is that I played some of that. I was sort of stoked about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to check that game out. And I spent an hour with it, and was like, I got better things to do, really. So anything that gives it another lease on life and hopefully gives it some more stuff to enjoy about it is good. The whole like time attack. What are they calling it? Not time attack.
I think turbo mode.
Turbo mode.
Turbo
That
trial.
sounds.
I think
That's. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that feels like it's targeting the hardest of the hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're that kind of person that like, oh, I love these levels, I know them backward and forward, and I want to be able to like show off that I can get through them super fast. So that's another way of saying like, I don't know how much that mode actually adds for the majority of fans, maybe. But better visual quality, extra playable character, all that kind of stuff is great.
Yeah, this is one of those upgrades where, like Mario Wonder, they announced that, okay, you'll get better resolution and smoother frame rate and better load times. I'm like, okay, that's all good. I didn't think that those were necessarily problems when Mario Wonder came out originally. When they say like better resolution, faster load times, the load times in the Switch 1 version were kind of atrocious. And then also like sharpening up the graphics to like the point that they should be in 2025, 2026. That stuff actually feels very meaningful to me. And also, this is a free update. So that's even better. Like, you don't have to pay $20 to do it because these feel like really meaningful, like visual upgrades and also functional. If you talk about the load times, they showed a side by side of the load times. And I was like, my God, like I did not even realize how long it takes to reload back into a level just if you die. And it's like,
we're all spoiled
crazy
these days though, right? Even like the load times that were long, they were that terrible compared to stuff from a long time ago. But
oh yeah,
you're right. It's nice to have them in a better place than they were. On the free side, I have to imagine there was a calculus that went on there where there was already people who were like, this thing costs too much, right? Like, as you said, it's sort of a full retail price product. So it makes sense to me that that would be one that they would make a conscious choice. Like, we put it at full retail price. People didn't love it. Trying to charge another 10 or 20 bucks to get them to come back is not a winning proposition.
Yeah, especially with people who are unsatisfied. Like, could you imagine if the Switch 2 upgrade for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was like $10. Like there would have been riots in the Me
Yeah.
Plaza.
Riots in the Me Plaza. Yeah.
But yeah, that free update is available now. So if you have Donkey Kong
Okay.
Country Returns HD and you have a Switch 2, you can download that update and get all those goodies for free.
Cool.
So, Matt, we talked about this when we were talking about Tanabe's retirement, but for the past several years, Nintendo has found a real life home at Universal Studios parks in Osaka, Los Angeles, and Orlando.
Mm.
And the Osaka and Orlando parks recently got the Donkey Kong Country expansion. And now it seems like that partnership is expanding to even more intellectual properties on the Nintendo side. And I think we all expected Zelda to be next. But Universal Studios has announced a, quote, world-class Pokemon attraction coming to the Osaka location before it will roll out to the Orlando park. And the quote says, quote, this year marks the 30th anniversary of Pokemon, and we are extremely pleased to be able to fully launch this new project with you all at this major milestone. Our mission is to enrich both the real and virtual worlds through the existence of Pokemon, and we produce Pokemon every day. With this project, too, we hope to create new entertainment that is unique to theme parks as a rich experience to the real world and continue to provide surprises to people all over the world. So I don't know if you've been following the Poke Park Kanto Park. Have you heard about that?
Mm-mm.
So that is a completely separate thing. That opens up in Tokyo in a couple of weeks. And basically it's like a real life park in Tokyo where you can walk through and like there's Pokemon statues all over. So it feels like you're walking through like a forest that's like inhabited by Pokemon. Then you come out on the other side. There's like a town that has a gym that you can go watch like a show where it's like an electric gym. So I'm sure it's like a really cool light show. And you watch like Pokemon battles take place. And then there's a Pokemon center that has like a shop and everything in it. And then I think there's a couple of like pretty small rides. But that's opening in Tokyo, I think February first week. So it's right around the corner for that. But that seems like completely different from what this is going to be. Matt, have you been to Super Nintendo World?
I haven't yet. I would like to, but you know, tickets to Universal. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of money.
I do know what you're saying. What would you want from a Pokemon experience if like it was to be, I don't know if it's going to be added to Super Nintendo World or if it's going to be a completely separate thing, given like there's kind of weird ownership things with Pokemon, but what would you want from a Pokemon experience?
Well, first of all, I would say I think it makes sense to me why they chose Pokemon over Zelda. I think Zelda's amazing, and it's maybe it's certainly a foundational property for Nintendo, and they've got the movie coming up and all that kind of good stuff. But it's also sort of a lonely journey of a hero through a difficult situation, and like that's part of what works about Zelda. Pokemon's all about cute, fun, collecting creatures and seeing them battle, and it feels more theme parky to me than Zelda would.
Not to mention Pikachu, I think, is the only character in all of gaming that may rival Mario as the most iconic character.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people of a lot of generations know Pikachu, right? They recognize that character, even if they can't name him, they know him. I don't know. I mean, I for myself, I think I would be the first to say I'm not like a huge Pokemon guy, so it's not like there's something special I would want. I do think that they would be wise to capitalize on the idea of like collectability across a theme park that's themed around Pokemon. If you don't come in that door and have some sort of declaration that you need to catch all of them, and spend the day wandering around doing the activities and that will let you get some sort of digital device filled up with Pokemon, or mark off your digital card of like, I got this Pokemon and this one, and that would be a missed opportunity, I would say.
And they already have those wristbands that they sell at Universal Studios for Super Nintendo World. So that could work directly into the Nintendo World app that you have to download in order to take part in that. So that, I mean, you're dead on, I think.
Yeah, I think that is, I mean, if I'm coming up with that off of 10 seconds of you sharing the idea with me, I I'm very, very confident that they are well ahead of me. So I think you could be fairly confident there would be something like that.
Oh man, and I
But
just thought of like, because when they put out the Donkey Kong Country expansion to Super Nintendo World, they started selling Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong wristbands.
sure.
A Pikachu or like a Jigglypuff or like Meowth or something like that, those would fly off the shelves.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Oh my goodness.
So I mean, all the way around, that sounds like a, a valuable, smart expansion.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool to supplement the rest of the Nintendo world. But yeah, we have no idea when any of this stuff is going to be revealed or announced or open or whatever. But there's also the rumor that any Waterworld stuff that still remains at Universal Studios could be a good spot for the Zelda expansion that is surely inevitable at some point in the future,
Hmm.
because they could just theme it around like, either Hyrule Castle and like the moat, or they could theme it around like a water temple style thing, which everybody
Hmm.
loves the water temple. So I'm sure that would be a
Yeah.
very popular choice. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff they could do with that.
I
But
mean,
yeah, Pokemon.
if I'm a theme park designer, especially in the same city as a Disney park, the way that some of those are, I'd be real attracted to the idea of like, we can have our own castle, right?
Well, they already have Peach's Castle and Bowser's Castle in Super Nintendo
Yeah,
World,
yeah,
but yeah, like
fair
a
enough.
Hyrule Castle is so
A
visually
Hyrule
striking.
Castle, like where it's like focused on exploration and like going through it and stuff like that. That could be pretty cool.
That would be awesome. But yeah, we'll definitely keep you up to date on any other news that comes out of the Pokemon Universal partnership that just got announced. And we'll close on this, Matt, in terms of like the news stuff for this episode. In the next segment, we're going to be talking about a game you reviewed for Game Informer, but we actually got some news for a different game that you reviewed for Game Informer, and that game is Ball Pit, which, if anybody listening to the show hasn't played, it's kind of like this very cool combination of like the classic arcade game Breakout meets Vampire Survivors meets twin stick shooter.
It's
And
weird.
it ended
It's
up being one
great.
of my favorite games of 2025. And I think, Matt, you were quite fond of it as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I would not warn anyone away from that game. I think it's clever. It's genre mashup. All works very well. It's very approachable and easy to pick up for almost anybody. But I think with plenty of stuff to kind of master over time. So even like longtime dedicated gamers like you or I are going to get a lot out of it. The whole like town building thing, I think, is a fun loop that will bring you back a lot. Um, and I think the thing that was most striking about that game that I continue to think is just remarkable is how much the developer was able to make something that consistently felt so fresh. The idea that like, oh well, it's a bouncing ball, and it's kind of like bouncing off bricks, then coming back, and you're shooting it back up. It feels like that would be like very one note, and the fact that it's not is what is remarkable about the game. Because as you're
Mm-hmm.
changing characters and abilities and things like that you're using, they frequently dramatically change the feel of going through a level, and give you a new way to chase things, a new way to experience the game. So yeah, having more of that game, more characters in particular, is nothing but good.
For sure. And that is what we're going to be getting, because a free update was announced this week. It's called the Regal Update. Adds two new hunters. So there's the Carouser that kind of uses returning balls, like spinning around him, like we mentioned Magneto earlier in this segment. But they orbit him and deal damage and protect him before they return back to him. And there's the Falconer, who has two falcons that attack enemies for him. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
There'll
that's
also
fun.
be 8 new ball types and then other stuff that isn't announced quite yet. And Matt, you've put more time into Ball Pit than I have. How impactful does this sound?
I think that sounds great to me. I mean, like it's smart to focus on new characters, and changing up the existing experience. I uh, I th- I do wonder how easy it is going to be to draw people back in. I would say for all my love of it, I don't know that I need more Ball X Pit. Um, but but that's because I spent a lot of time with it. You know, I like
Yeah.
really explored a lot of those characters and got all the way through all the levels. I beat the game. You know, like so. It might be fun to just see those new characters and try it out. But I wonder if it could really like pull me back in for any extended period of time now that I feel like I've kind of hit the mastery threshold on that project and I'm ready to move on to other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard when you play a game to death and then it gets something really cool. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many games where I bought the season pass when the game came out. Like The Witcher 3, that's a game that I adore. But I bought the season pass or whatever it was when it first came out, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely play all the expansions. And then like by the time the expansions came out, I was like, I think I'm done with this game. I put like 75, 80 hours into it. I don't think I need to go back and like relearn all the systems and everything
Yeah.
and pick up where my character is. This is a lot smaller scale of that, and it's also a lot smaller of a delay between the launch of the
Yeah.
game
Yeah.
and the launch of the expansion, because the update's coming out. It's free and it comes out January 26th. But there is something that might, I don't know if that we don't know what this is, so it could be nothing, but they also teased another surprise that they will reveal on the day that this update launches. So we can stay tuned for that. Maybe it'll be something that might tempt you a little bit more to jump back in. Maybe like new like bosses or levels or something. I don't know.
Well, and it's worth saying that like obviously not everybody has played that game yet. If you haven't yet played it, going in and arriving into the game with a free update that will expand the scope of it and give you more characters to play with when you play it for the first time that's great. You know, I think it'll be that much more fun, that much more content to explore. So more power to those guys making a call to enrich an already great game. I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. And it's a game that I'm looking forward to diving back in, because I have not yet reached those mastery levels that you're talking about. So it'll be cool to see how these new characters impact the way I'm experiencing the game as I continue to play through it. But we are going to take our first break of this episode. When we get back, we will get Matt's thoughts on a new game that may appeal to fans of Hollow Knight. We will be right back. Are back, and though January doesn't have the biggest games of the year, it certainly has its fair share of fun, smaller titles. Mio Memories in Orbit arrived this week, and it has gotten strong comparisons to Hollow Knight. But Matt, after reading your review, it seems like maybe that's valid, but also a bit reductive. How are you feeling about Mio Memories in Orbit?
Mio made me curse a lot. I'll start by saying that it's very challenging. And any way that you would want to headline talking about that game or considering whether you should play it or not should be maybe chiefly informed by that fact. I would hazard to say, having played Silksong and Mio, I think there are parts of Mio that are harder than Silksong, especially in the platforming side of things. Although Silksong definitely has some really, really hard platforming as well. I think the comparison, though, is fair. And I think I would say that people who really liked Silksong should have Mio on their radar. It's a gorgeous game. Visually, it's got this sort of like watercolor aesthetic that brings life to what otherwise could be a really sterile environment, because it's sort of this like it's like a giant space vessel that is in disrepair, that you're exploring across, and the visual style brings a lot of life to that space. It's got a kind of haunting, very spare musical score that includes a bunch of sort of diversions into kind of melancholy choral moments, which is very pretty. And and the exploration is and the precision of combat, all that kind of stuff is just great. It feels, again, not to overplay the comparison, but it feels like it has some of the same qualities that people like about Silk Song, in that sense of like everything is very crafted, everything is very purposeful. If you make a mistake, if you die, that was your fault. Now they would maybe have made it very, very hard not to make that mistake. Like you got to have absolutely split second timing on that 1 second double jump, or else you're gonna die. But it was your fault. Like there's nothing about the game that you could be like, well, they you know they designed a character that isn't reactive enough to my button inputs and that kind of thing. There's none of that. It's very, very um, tight and well structured. Um, but it brings me back to the point that like it is a game. It's a game like Metroid, uh, Castlevania, Ori, Hollow Knight. Take your pick of comparative experiences. In that you're exploring this big environment and gradually expanding where you can go. There are a lot of places in this game where you're going to get lost, and you're going to be like, okay, well, I got this new thing that I can do. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And cut to 2 hours later, maybe before you have the answer. And I think even more than a lot of my preferred term, search action games, you the answer is not obvious, right? Like a lot of times those games, it's like there's a red door, and you got to go find the red door, and you found it. Okay, now I've got the thing that hits red doors. I know where that is. I'm going to go back to that spot. This is less of that. There's a lot of times where you get some sort of upgrade, and there's like a hidden wall in some out of the way chamber that you didn't really think about being important, but it is the gateway to an entirely different section of the map, and a boss that you have to fight in order to progress the game. And if you don't think to go back to that place, you're kind of out of luck. The bosses are challenging, although I think a little bit, to further carry forward the comparison to Silk Song, while the bosses in Mio Arch are very, very difficult, and you'll probably need several runs to beat them, they don't. One of the challenges I think in Silk Song is that it's hard to even parse what's happening on screen sometimes. It's such a chaotic, fast-moving gameplay. In Mio, I think the boss fights are challenging, but like things are clearly telegraphed, and you can read the screen, for lack of a better way to describe it. You can read the screen better. It's a cleaner display in the midst of a big fight, usually, which I kind of like. And yeah, it definitely has things where you're like, wow, that was very, very cool. And in particular, I'm going to walk very hesitantly here because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But there is a thing in the late game that is one of those things that's like, maybe it's not right to call it a twist exactly. It's not like a narrative twist, but there's a thing that changes what you are understanding about the way that the game works, and about how you're exploring and things like that. And it only happens quite late in the experience, but was really like, oh, wow, that's neat. Now I kind of get it. And if only for that moment, it's worth trying to push through the hard stuff if you're into this kind of game. If you are not into hard bosses, very precise platforming, like complicated exploration of meandering chambers and things like that, I know it is a pretty game, and in that sense, it might sort of attract. But this game is not for you. I think Silk Song had a similar dilemma. There were a lot of people who, because of this sort of cuteness of it, people found, and also hearing friends talk about it for years and years, waiting for Silksong to come out. There was a little bit of like um, sense at launch. There were some people who maybe came into that game who maybe wouldn't normally have been trying to try out something that difficult, and who were just astounded that this game that they just purchased was as brutally difficult as it was. So I'm here to say, in the case of Mio, expect something similar there. Just because it's pretty and it's uh, um, looks like a neat world to explore, I think it's only worth doing that if you're up for like a big challenge.
I mean, Silksong reached a level of kind of like mythology
Yeah,
because it like there are non-gaming podcasts that maybe have taught, like I've listened to for years and years and years, and they've talked about gaming like two times in like the 10 years I've listened to them, and they have brought up Silksong, and it's like, wow, like you guys are talking about this must be like a huge deal, because it's easy when, like, we work in the industry to be like, oh, that's a really big deal, but I wonder how many non-gamers know about game X or game Y.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, Silksong, like I've talked about how like there's been two times where a flight attendant has seen me playing something on my Switch, and they've been like, oh my god, I love that game. One was Tears of the Kingdom. The other one was Balatro, and that was when I was like, oh, Balatro's kind of blowing up if, like,
Blowing up,
flight
yeah.
attendants are stopping me and telling me to take off my headphones so they can
It's your
nerd
metric.
out with me about this game that just,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
was an indie game that blew up, obviously. And I mean, Silksong seems like it kind of reached that status just for the sole reason that, like, it took like 8 years after announcement to come out.
Sure.
And I mean, one thing that I liked about your review is you didn't try to just be like, oh, this is a great game that should be played by everyone. Like, you very like intentionally laid out, like, this is not one of those games that it's like, it's a masterpiece. You have to, like, no matter what preference you have in gaming, you need to play this. You were like, no, this is like a very specific recommendation. Like, if you don't like this, you're not going to like this.
I think there are things. Yeah, that is true. I don't think it is for everyone. I think it's a very good game. I actually think there are aspects of the very purposeful decision making that went into how Mio is structured that I don't think make it better because of the certain choices around challenge. Uh, there are times, for instance, that like they have some pretty smart assist mode things that you can turn on in the settings. That even, by the way, when those are on, the game is still plenty difficult. I played a good bit of the game both with some of that stuff on and with all of it off. And one of the assists that you can put on makes it so that if you stop what you're doing on the ground, you get a unit of health back. And so if you're jumping through the world and you hit a spike pit or whatever and you get knocked out, and that would take away your health segment and put you back to your last safe platform, right? So if you do that, let's say you have 4 health segments, you do it 4 times, you're gone. And it's back to the checkpoint. And then you got to make your way back up to that crazy thing. So that is hard, right? Like, because a lot of these things, I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying I needed to do them dozens of times to get through one like small platforming sequence. So the assist thing that gives you back a segment if you wait for like 5-10 seconds at the spot means that you could jump through a sequence, die, it kicks off your health segment, it puts you back at your last safe platform. If you wait there for a few seconds, you recharge that health unit you just lost, right? So that does kind of give you, as long as you have a little bit of patience to wait there on the ground, you could conceivably keep making runs at that one really hard platforming sequence indefinitely. Without that on, gosh, you'd spend a lot of time going back. And I had sequences like that when I was leaving it off. That was like, I'm not having more fun having to redo this section, a bunch of times to get back to that place.
Yeah,
So
those are always the toughest parts for me, is when, like, I don't mind a really difficult platforming or combat scenario, but when I have to replay the lead
yeah,
up to that,
It's so
it just
fun.
really starts wearing on me because it's like, all right, I've mastered this. And then like you think you've gotten so good, you can just kind of like lackadaisically like go through it. And then you die in the lead up to it. And you're like, oh my God, now I have to start this over again, even though it's not even the thing that I've been struggling with.
Well, Mio does another. There's another interesting thing that it does. There's a common term in games and movies and things like that called power fantasy, and I headlined our review as powerless fantasy
Yeah.
because Mio is almost incessantly interested in keeping you in check. You can get more health segments, but then over the course of the game, Mio is deteriorating. And so at distinct points in the story, as you're progressing, you lose a health segment. And so you can work for like hours to gather the different, imagine like in Zelda, you get the little segments of hearts, right? Imagine
Mhm.
you're doing that. You get all 4 segments after searching all around and doing all the shrines and whatever to get those. You get your new heart, and like 10 minutes later, they take away one of your hearts. That's what this
And
game does.
permanently, not like Tears of the Kingdom
Permanently.
with like the darkness
Oh, no,
stuff.
no, 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 it's gone. And so you're always working against this like steady progression of making things harder on you. And that's not the only way it does that. I think there's also ways that like they structure the fast travel that you eventually get access to. Um, that you get into areas where like, oh well, this fast travel area is not connected to the prior fast travel area, so now that you're down in this new area, you're once again like isolated, and it's hard to make your way around to the other parts of the map that you want to get to. It's this consistent sense of like, we're gonna Mio is hurting, and we're gonna make you as the player feel that hurt.
Mm.
And you're never gonna feel like you're super strong or powerful. You do get to a point that you feel like you have a lot of traversal flexibility, and they have some very cool traversal powers in terms of the jumps and the floats, and there's a kind of a cool spider climb ability that lets you move along walls eventually. So you do eventually get a little bit of sense of mastery and power there, but it's there's no point in the game that you get to a place where you're like, finally I've crossed the threshold, and now my guy is really awesome and nobody can hurt him. And no, it's
Well,
not that.
I dug up a message that you sent to the team. You had sent out the prior day saying like, "Hey, like this is kind of a cool game. It's very challenging, but like I think it'd be cool to have like other people check this game out." And then 24 hours later, a message from Matt Miller to the entire editorial team. This is my update from yesterday to say that Mio has graduated from my previous declaration of very challenging to, oh my God, this is so hard. I will never get it. It's so hard. Why did they do this? And then you followed it up by saying, it remains good.
Yeah, no, I think everybody will have that. Pretty much anybody would have that sense about this game. Um, I think there's plenty of people. There is an audience for it, and I hope that audience finds this game. If you were like, I did all the challenges in Silk Song, and I just wish there was more. I mean, Mio is it's not exactly the same or anything. It's a very different vibe to the world, and there's some conscious things that they've made be a little bit different to how it's structured. Um, but you should play this game. Other people though, be careful, because I think there could be the potential for people to be like, oh, that looks amazing. I'm gonna go spend some money on that, and then right away, right from the beginning, it can be a very very hard game.
It's like recommending your favorite buffalo wings sauce to a friend. It's like you got to kind of be like, all right, can they handle a little bit of spice,
Or
or is this too
yeah,
much for
yeah.
them?
I think that's a good comparison. I would also maybe say like it being like if you were a cinemaphile and you found a really amazing old black and white French film that like blew your mind. That's not necessarily like going to your friend that likes Transformers movies and saying like you got to go check out this movie is maybe a bad idea, right?
Hey,
Uh,
you like Transformers 2. Have you seen Citizen Kane?
right. It's going to ask a lot of you, and not everybody's looking for that out of their game time, which is,
It,
by
re-
the way, totally fine.
it reminds me of the scene in The Sopranos where the women of the group get together and they're like, hey, we're gonna have movie night like once a week, and we're gonna work our way through like Time Magazine's 100 greatest movies of the 20th century. And they started with number one, which was Citizen Kane, and they all walked out like, maybe we just choose our own movie next time. Like, this is just this seems overrated. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
you gotta be in a very specific mindset to enjoy stuff like that, and I think that's kind of the same case with Mio Memories in Orbit. You
I
gotta
think
kind of
so.
be in that mindset to really be willing to overcome a challenge, and in order to do that, ram your head into a wall, figuratively, hopefully, multiple times over and over again.
With that, with all that said, props to this team. I think we've determined it's a French team. I want to say, if I can butcher the correct pronunciation, I think it's Dos Diem is maybe the correct way, which
I
translates
think
as, I believe,
Dues DCM,
something like that.
something.
I believe it translates to something like 12 tenths or something like that. Um, big props to them for like putting out a really uh, thoughtfully crafted and beautiful game. I think it's very cool. It's one of those games that like, oh, I now need to pay attention to that studio, right? I did not know them before, and now I'm gonna like be watching them and seeing what they do next and that kind of thing. Because whether you love that high challenge, those that kind of exploration or not, having a studio that can bring this level of precision and smart design to a game is it's hard. It's hard to do well, and they did great.
Well, if this sounds up your alley, Mio Memories in Orbit is available now on Switch, Switch 2, and every other major platform. And if you want to read Matt's positive review of it, you can go over to GameInformer.com and do just that. Matt, I've already kept you over the time that we talked about, but before we recorded, real quick, you mentioned that you recently played through Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom with your daughter. I guess what were your main takeaway from that experience?
Well, it was great. I mean, anybody who not just in games, but I think anybody who has the experience of having kids in their life, your own kids or nephews and nieces, and you can take a hobby that you love and share it with them and do it together. It's really rewarding, and I recommend it to anyone. I think that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were fun because, like, a lot of the time it was me. Especially in the earliest phase of that. I mean, we kind of did this over a course of like a couple years. Those are really big games, and it wasn't the only thing we were doing together or anything, right? And so when there was time that we could devote to it, we were making progress. And it was interesting to me to like the earliest days of that, it was pretty much just me with my hands on the controller, and to see the gradual like enthusiasm and excitement for her like wanting to take the controller and like play herself and run around as Link, and also sort of fall in love with that mythology. And in the same way that I remember, I mean, obviously I didn't have Breath of the Wild, I had original Zelda and Link to the Past and stuff like that back in my day, but to see her sort of like thinking about the characters and what does this mean that Link and Zelda are this way, and charting on the story and trying to understand the timeline and all that kind of stuff that like Zelda fans like to do. It's cool. I think the game is a good one for kids who like to, you know, like if you got a thinker of a kid, it's fun to go do those shrines,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because you can, even if you're the one with the hands on the controller, you can be like, okay, well, what should we do now? You know, and then she'd really be trying to like think through the different powers that we have and how to navigate those spaces and stuff. So A+, I recommend it to anyone. Those are great games, but they're great games to share with a kid. I'd also add that I think sometimes when people think about playing games with kids, they think they get caught up in the idea of it needing to be multiplayer,
Mm-hmm.
which Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, it's not a multiplayer game. I think that sometimes misses the point that a lot of times the kids want to be involved and want to talk to you about the game. Maybe sometimes they want to be playing, but a lot of the engagement for them sometimes is like seeing it played skillfully by you, and then being able to have input. Like, I want to go over there, right? And or I want to, what's at the top of that mountain? Or I love it when we do the sky view tower thing and we shoot up in the air and do the parachute thing. Can we do that again? And so just whether it's with Zelda or with other things, I'd offer that recommendation to folks that I think you can find a lot of fun together, even in some single player experiences, by offering some agency to the kid that's sitting with you and letting them be involved in like what's happening and the decisions you're making, the things you're doing next, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would echo that. Even though I don't have any kids, I do have a brother who was, he's 7.5 years younger than me. So I had to introduce him to gaming through a lot of those similar methods, or, the old like, here's the second controller, you can play with me, even though it's a one-player game, or the controller's not plugged in, or something like that. Or,
yeah, right. You can press the buttons.
Yeah, the ultimate thing was like, oh, you can be Tails in Sonic 2, and it's like, yeah, you can die left and right, and you're always going to be okay. So that type of thing is also great for little kids. Completely different games here, but like, are you gonna, if she's really like into like kind of like the universe of Zelda, do you think you would kind of expand the lore a little bit with like the Hyrule Warriors, like Age of Calamity or Age of Imprisonment?
We are actively playing Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment as we speak. We did the other Hyrule Warriors game as well, which was fun. And that was kind of a nice departure, because that is a game you can play co-op, and because it's really just like knocking away enemies, thousands and thousands of enemy moblins and that charge at you. It's fairly accessible for somebody like her. So she likes it. I think she likes she's enough into the fiction that the Age of Imprisonment and stuff where we're like, oh, now we're back in time with Zelda. And learning more about that is very intriguing to her. So yeah, she digs it.
Well, I hope you continue to enjoy gaming with both of your kids. I know that like, it's a very, very fun way to spend time with somebody. I mean, I think it even extends to like, friends and partners, like just introducing them to things you love. Like I'm watching some movies that I really love with my partner and we're having a great time. And I don't know if she's having a great time. I'm having a great time introducing them to her. Like, we've watched through all the Marvel movies together and everything. And that's a great, it's a great time. So like, I can't even imagine. I bet it's even more fulfilling introducing it to, your kids. So that's great. Matt, I know you're not the biggest social media guy, but anything you'd like to plug here on the way out?
Nothing beyond Game Informer, really, right? Like, if there is a social media life for me, it is in my work with Game Informer. So, come check out what we're doing. I feel like we're in a phase now after getting our feet under us post relaunch with GI that there's some very cool stuff happening. We're getting some very, very interesting cover stories and features. We have this, we now have the access to let people go back through all our old magazines, right? There's a lot of cool stuff in old issues of Game Informer if you're just looking for something to dig into your love of games and explore series that you're interested in. So I hope people continue to find us and come circle over and check out what we're doing, because I think there's some cool stuff happening and some especially cool stuff that's on the way here in 2026.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo. We are going to take one final break, and when we get back, we'll be talking some Final Fantasy VII Remake on Switch 2 with none other than Kyle Hilliard. We will be right back. We are back, and I mentioned at the tail end of the last segment that we would be joined on the other side of that break by Kyle Hilliard. Unfortunately, a scheduling conflict came up, and Kyle could no longer join us, so we will have to kick the Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade conversation onto another episode. To kind of give his basic thoughts, though, if you are curious about the Switch 2 port, because it is out now, I know that he was generally very positive about it, and I'll have to have Kyle back on at some point in the near future to talk about his full impressions of the game. If you're not familiar with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, if the 7 Remake, the base game, is the retelling of the first third of the Final Fantasy VII original game. And then the Remake Intergrade adds the intermission DLC, which adds an episode starring Yuffie, who is a main party member in the sequel, plus several weapons, armors, accessories, and summoning materia. It's just basically like the definitive edition of Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII Remake is an incredible game, and it sounds like this one runs pretty well on Switch 2. So if you've been waiting to play it because you don't have a PlayStation or you just want it on Switch, then this seems like it's a pretty good way to experience this game. Sorry, we don't have a full segment on it this week, but yeah, I mean, it's available now on Switch 2. And if you want to see more of how it runs, you can head on over to the Game Informer YouTube channel. I believe Kyle recorded a new gameplay today with somebody else on the Game Informer staff, so you can get the full impressions there if you're not wanting to wait for another week of all things Nintendo. But unfortunately, we kind of have to end this on an anticlimactic note. But thank you so much for listening. As you know, the Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. But you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. That is our show for this week. Thank you again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, real quick before we get out of here, I just want to take a moment to recognize and thank the $10 patrons of All Things Nintendo. Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chad Brecky, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jawar Hello, Johnny Five, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, KC Radio Man, Cody Gibson, Creeper 207, Ozman83, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Zane Sink, and Zek 3 Swords Sama. I know I say it all the time, but truly, this show would not exist without you. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast.